Welcome everybody to Cybrary's podcast. We are super pumped today to have old friends of ours on the podcast here. Kyle Hansloven, Chris Bisnet from Huntress. Welcome, boys.
Hey, huge thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Ryan. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Cybrary. I want to go around the horn and get some introductions from you guys. So Kyle, why don't we start with you?
Kyle, CEO of Huntress, chief janitor and great sounding voice, right?
I get it.
Top that, Chris.
Butter. Chris, how about you?
Yeah, so I'm Chris Bisnet. I'm the one of the co-founders, chief architect here at Huntress. My job is to build stuff and figure out how we take some of these business ideas and make them actually happen.
That's fun. I'm sure we'll be talking about that today. Mike?
Yep, and Mike Rowan, VP of Engineering and CISO, so head of security and head of technology. Basically, a lot of stuff just rolls up into me.
At Cybrary.
At Cybrary, yes.
You didn't just leave and go to Huntress all of a sudden, did you?
Yeah.
Oh, we haven't told you yet, Ryan.
Right. Yeah.
That's why we're doing this.
Exactly.
Surprise. Right. So, guys, I think we did our first content together when Cybrary, like you said, was probably 8 people, if that. It was back at our old office in Greenbelt, which is right up the street from here. We're in College Park now. But why don't you give us a little bit of a background story on the company? It was called Huntress Labs at the time, right? But give us a little bit of a background story on the company, how it came together, how it got started, that kind of thing.
Chris, you want me to take that?
Sure.
So, all good stories, especially with technical founders, usually are a solution in search of a problem instead of the other way around. Nobody ever likes to admit it, but Chris and I's background was offensive cybersecurity. Our other co-founder, John, same type of background, worked at NSA with us. We've kind of been married now 10 plus years. And the handle that we had at the time was, look, we knew anything and everything about breaking into systems. And it kind of started to wear on us that we weren't doing enough to give back. Fast forward now to 2020, we've got 23,000 businesses using our software. So when they have an incident, we can quickly discover it, help them respond, remediate, and more importantly, recover. Just kind of commoditize what an incident happens. And it turns out that was just a huge gap that in 2015, we had an inkling it was a problem, had no clue that it was going to be such a, wild roller coaster between success and then obviously pivoting as we went along the way to kind of really tailor our offering to what people really had for problems instead of what we thought was the problem.
Got it. Like every company that starts out or every startup out there, it's never entirely up and to the right? But you guys have had a lot of success in recent, in the recent year and a half, 2 years. What was it like in those early days to kind of keep going and try to get over the hump that was the inflection point that you need?
It was a slow burn for us. Some people are like they get their idea, they make something, they post it to the internet and people just start showing up and it goes gangbusters, right? Like that's like the typical startup dream. For us, it was a very slow burn. Initially, we decided we were going to go after the small and medium market because when you go to the enterprise level, you got to really have all of these features already ironed out. You got to be fairly feature complete. And when we looked at it, there were a lot of players there with tons of money, throwing around a lot of money doing marketing. And we said, it's going to be really tough to compete with them without having a lot of money. So is there some other way we can do it? And we realized there were just tons of these small and medium businesses who were completely underserved. Like they just didn't have products that could either fit their budget, fit their skill set, right? Like if they don't have a SOC, if they don't have security experts, a lot of these tools were out of their range for them to be able to use, and it didn't fit their workflow, right? They couldn't just pick up the tool and use it and have it tell them what they needed to do. You had to put in all this effort and do all this analysis and stuff. So it just didn't really work for them. So we started going after small and medium business, but as what was surprising to us is we went to a lot of these investors and said, hey, look, we're having this traction. We're getting these people. They're signing up. We'd like some investment. And everybody was kind of like, I don't know about the small and medium businesses. We know a lot about enterprise. If you want to sell to enterprise, we can talk. Small and medium business, I don't really know. So for a long time, it was bootstrapped. We got a little bit of money from some angels early, but there was a lot of grinding. Would you say, Kyle, for like 2 years, 3 years?
Yeah, we can BS about that a little bit more later. But I mean, Ryan, maybe some of the most impactful moments are even in us hanging with you all, where you're talking about where Cyber was figuring out where their fit was. Obviously, understanding there was some knowledge gaps. Hey, we need to help people train and learn better. Can we help provide content? Can we be that learning management system? And continuing to pivot and grow for us was, cool. Congrats, our technology worked, but how do you really wrap the messaging around it? How do you get better at marketing? And so our success really didn't start till 2.5 years into it, where we saw any success, let alone this was truly going to be month over month solid growth.
Gotcha. For us, some of the key inflection points in our company came via product discovery. So a product person who's trained in product, they think about concepts like jobs to be done, Clay Christensen thing. And some of our best inflection points, or our greatest inflection points, came on the heels of real value discovery, right? So we were kind of the opposite of you guys. We were pretty good at marketing, not so great at product. And it took us to kind of get good product people in here before the inflection points hit. So it sounds like it's kind of a reverse thing. You guys are great product guys. You know the heck out of your craft. And then it took some of that messaging and everything to get to the right audience, right?
Yeah. Oh gosh. Everybody talks about the successes. I think the failures are much more fun. I mean, I was literally calling the small businesses initially, and they were like, listen, we don't even have an IT department. You should call these people we outsource to. Like, there's nothing worse than when you think you're calling to a customer, and not only have you got the persona so wrong, there's nobody at the business that does what you do. Like, that's just about the biggest swing and a miss you can get.
You did a lot of it in the first couple of years, huh?
Yeah, I mean, but you become an expert, right? I mean, that's how you get good, right? Is knowing the basics. So,
that led us to a lot of discoveries like you were talking about that helped us get to product market fit, where we were talking with these people saying like, hey, you have this thing, like, what are the problems that you have? What are you doing? What works? What doesn't work? All that kind of stuff. Like, I'm more interested in what's not working for you. And then, so we just kind of kept having those conversations, and we would talk about it and say, hey, look, we got all these people here who are having the same problem. Can we help them solve that? And so we just kind of went that way.
I think one of the challenges for companies is also knowing when to say no. Like, things, we can definitely help you with that problem. I can't tell you how many companies I've worked at where we end up chasing the problem because we know we can solve it, but it's not that, it's tangential. And I'm curious what your experiences were with that.
So we got pretty good at saying no. I don't know if it's that we were all founders that had kids or what it was, but we have heard some horror stories, especially in the enterprise space, where people are like, "Look, I just landed one of the top 3 banks, but now I'm more or less shackled to their needs and their requirements, and I'm gonna have to tailor my product to exactly what they need to be able to survive this thing." And we got really good at saying, like, we generally knew what we wanted to be. Like Ryan hit it, the nail on the head with saying, hey, not the best at marketing what we did want to be, even though we knew what we wanted to be.
Makes sense.
So who are those buyers? And if you want, maybe we can get a little more deep into the technical side of the product, which obviously I would defer to Mike for the questions there. But why don't you tell us who the buyers are right now?
Yeah. So talking about getting nerdy, right? We obviously all think about, when you're talking about securing Windows computers in the SMB market, like 95% of them are Windows, albeit Chris is right now on this Zoom on a Linux machine. I've always got a virtual machine running something, right? Or most of our companies on Mac OS. We had to really first understand, like, where is that center mass? All right, we've got to cover Windows at minimum. The next part of it was, all right, where are hackers getting in that we can make the biggest difference and show quickest proof of value, right? That was one of those things of, so what if you're able to make the big difference? If you can't make anybody realize that in that typical elevator speech or quick moment, that was going to make or break us, is what our belief was in 2015. And so we put all of our effort into this, like, self-service, super easy, click a button and kind of show yourself, hey, can we find a hacker on that Windows computer that's already has access despite you running like awesome preventive tools? And this was based on Chris's background at NSA, where our jobs weren't necessarily initial access, but we were there to be long-term persistent access, right? So if you think about that acronym, Advanced Persistent Threat, or APT, we were kind of going after the P, or the persistence part. And that was it. That was our whole bread and butter when we initially got started, was how do we find somebody dwelling in your network that's already in there, not on like a test VM, not like, with a malware sample, but truly in your network. And then that was kind of the recipe. We put all our eggs in that basket, that if we could show you something, it would make a difference. And Chris, we're still at like high 70s, low 80s% of our trials we're able to show that. So that was kind of key.
Yeah, I think when we were having a lot of these early sales conversations where we were getting trials in, and this was like, back in the day before we really had like a whole sales team, when it was like Kyle and myself, and then we'd hired one sales guy. And, trials were coming in, and we'd have these like high touch, we'd call them, we'd have these long calls with them, try to figure out what was going on. And it wasn't long after that where we kind of realized, like, hey, some of these trials, they would go the full trial period. They'd go 21 days, they'd go 30 days. And at the end, there was still this, they weren't sure. We'd still have to have this conversation to convince them that was the thing they wanted. But then we also had these trials, they would like come in, they would love it, and it was like a slam dunk. And like they would sign up and they would buy. And so we really had to step back and say, like, well, what's the difference between these two trials? And at the end of the day, like Kyle said, it was that proof of value. For those people who signed up and actually went through the process of like using the product, they deployed it out. I think at one point we had some stat where it was like, if you sign up for Huntress and you deploy 100 agents or more, the chance of us finding something was like 80, almost 90%. And it made closing those deals real easy. So for us, that became, that was like the North Star. How do we get a trial in, and how do we get them past that 100 endpoint mark? Because it just made the deal so much easier to convert. Like there was so much less effort that we had to put into convincing somebody that this was a thing they needed. We'd shown them, hey, this is what you need, and here's why.
Yeah, Ryan, I'd tell this story to my like punk teenage kids, and ironically, one of them told me, they're like, "Oh yeah, Dad, didn't you know seeing is believing?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, yeah,
Schooled.
Yeah, I got that. It's a little bit harder in real life, but it is sometimes that simple. You just don't, you got all the technical chops. Chris and I's probably coolest technical accolade is we once won DEF CON's Capture the Flag. And now that's like an old accolade for us because it's, 8 years ago we won the darn thing or something like that. So our skills are starting to atrophy a bit, but keeping up the technical excellence as you bring on other people to do that for you has been something we were also big about. So not to reverse the question on you, Mike or Ryan, but when you guys started out, obviously content was huge, but you've scaled big time too. How are you guys keeping up with making sure the people you're bringing on board are technical, and handling that without your own skills atrophying?
Yeah, sure. Well, for us, we did a really great job of, building a community. So it kind of started with that. So in that community, you have everything from CISOs, all the way down the food chain in cybersecurity. So so when we built that community, we now have a team called the Content and Community Team. And so the Content and Community Team, they bring in people into what we have a creator network. So these people are like intentionally there to create. And so they get highly vetted before they go in. And then the content team also deploys rubrics of quality standards to these people. And we actually have an instructional coach that coaches subject matter experts on how to teach a great online course, or how to create a great lab, or how to create a CTF challenge or whatever, right? An assessment, that kind of thing. So it started with building a community, and then you just put processes in place and coaching, and that's where we are today. So that's kind of how we got there. But that didn't come about until, what, Mike, a year and a half ago?
Yeah, something like that. And then also on the sales side, I think we do a great job. The content community team does a great job of talking to them about what the courses are, what the point is, and sort of working hand in hand on these engagements. There's even a resource or two that's dedicated to helping on board customers and with regard to the content. And similarly, product has those same conversations with that team. So we don't necessarily have to bring in the most technical sales teams. We just have to bring in people who are open-minded, capable of learning, and can really sort of process it and then talk to our customers about what we have to offer.
Gosh, it's crazy what a little motivation, right? You bring on the right person that wants to learn, that wants to make a difference, and sometimes make a much bigger difference than your rock stars that have the name recognition. So that's cool that you guys are figuring that out too.
Yeah, for sure. So we're going to jump into the technical side a little bit there.
Yeah, Chris. You're chief architect. You want to explain where we were and how we got to where we're at and what some of the shadiness under the hood was?
Yeah, so I guess to take it all the way back, so Kyle had been kicking around this idea for a while of like finding attackers through persistence, and so we had all these conversations when we were working at NSA, like, hey, how come, how come we're able to get by? Like, how come AV's not catching us? Like, how come we're not getting caught more? And when we really like looked at it, knowing and understanding the technical workings of like how AV works, they have a really hard job of like, how do they detect something they've never seen before, right? And so for us, we said, okay, if you've never seen it, how can you tell if it's good or bad? Is there a way that you can look at this differently? And then can we approach it from that standpoint and say, hey, we're going to look at it through a different lens, basically, or from a different perspective. So whereas AV is looking at a file to say, like, do I know of this file? Is it a known good file or is it a known bad file?
Is the behavior going to be something shady? Is it going to do something malicious? Right? There's all, whether it's behavior heuristics.
Right.
I mean, we're kind of at the point in the game where you're not trying to figure out the 20 or 30 or 40% problem. You're at the point where you've got it 90, 95% solved. And now, that's an 80-20 rule, right? The last 20% takes 80% of your time. That's where AV's at, trying to solve these things. So that how do we do something different was super core. So gosh, how did I convince you, Chris? It was Black Hat one year and I managed to get you on. What was it?
I don't know. I think it was FOMO, to be completely entirely honest. Like, it was FOMO, right? Like, Kyle had asked me this a couple of times. And I was like, I don't know, man. Like, it seems obvious. Like, now that I'm thinking about it, like, why isn't AV doing it? There's got to be something we don't know. Like, there's dragons lurking there that we don't know about, and that's what's going to make it hard. And then you and John and Mark had submitted and were accepted to Mach 37, and you told me about that, and you told me about all this stuff, and I just had this FOMO. I had to be part of it. I think I asked you guys if I could join and be a founder.
So Mike, are you early Windows guy by any chance? Ever play with like Windows 3.1 or Windows NT4?
Yeah, no, I'm not old. So definitely use those systems.
Yeah, I looked at my last video here with Cybrary, and I had no gray, and I looked young, and there's no wrinkles, and this is what 5 years will do to you. But what was getting down to the real technical of what we're looking at, if you think about let's take Windows 95. Well, I remember powering on Windows 95, and instead of Skype automatically launching, which Microsoft now owns, it was like MSN Messenger that would come up, right, or AIM, right, automatically launch and come up. And so what was really bothersome is like back in those days, those applications automatically launch with an entry in your registry called a run key. Mm-hmm. And there's on Windows, right, there's like 200 different ways: services, drivers, scheduled tasks, startup folder, you name it, all kinds of provider DLLs. There's just about a bajillion ways to launch things on Windows. And Microsoft is all about, let's have backwards compatibility forever.
Right.
So here we are in 2015, and I'm like, Chris, I'm seeing malware that's still using the persistence mechanisms from like Windows 95 days. And we're like, gosh, this is like 20 years old. This couldn't possibly still be the thing, but that's what our data was showing. And so we did. We went out there and just started like, let's collect this in mass and let's see what we could find. And it turns out, this morning, our team found, once again, run keys in malware still working here in 2020. So we're talking 25 years ago, but these same exact persistence mechanisms. And it turns out most of the community had rallied behind, let's find the advanced part, right? Advanced process injection techniques, advanced maybe exploits, right? Or how are they, staging their command and control, doing crazy stuff with like DNS records to be able to maybe even exfiltrate DNS. And it turns out there was a gap that while everybody looked at the advanced side, and then you had other vendors that looked at the threat actors, the T, right? Right? We skipped over that persistence piece there and nobody looked at it. So now, 5 years into it, we kind of know this data set better than anybody. And it's a bit, I won't be as egotistical or to say it's like shooting fish in a barrel, because hackers don't work that way. They don't make it easy. There's humans on the other end of it. But we've gotten so good now that we're actually expanding beyond just persistence, right? Expanding just beyond what we were doing and now opening up new cans of worms where we're finding hackers, just like the P was unaddressed the first 5 years of our business. It turns out there's a whole lot of other acronyms that don't fit in APT where people aren't focusing on.
Right. In terms of, so yeah, I mean, I definitely remember that stuff from Windows days. It's just funny you bring it up because this weekend I was doing something similar with my Mac. I feel like back in the day, one of the big pulls for me to switch from Windows was I fell in love with Next machines back in the 90s. And so OS X is just a Next machine.
Yep.
And so, but this weekend there was something, so we have multiple accounts for our kids. Something was definitely slowing down his account and I could not figure out what was automatically starting up somewhere. And I feel like they've gone from this nice, like, hey, if you want to uninstall something, just delete it, to, you know, like just take it out of the applications, put it in the trash. Now it's almost exactly like Windows used to be, where you have to like run Unix commands to find all the different places this thing may have inserted itself. I guess it's just funny that it just doesn't seem to it's never going to go away. I guess is where, yeah.
When I think about like the CyberArray's content creators, I've definitely seen some, whether it was in some of the older forums or even just some of the newer content, talking about like, you know, Windows has some tooling called the sysinternal suite. There are all kinds of ways to be able to do basic system administration, monitor processes, look at places in the registry, you name it. There's a feature for it.
Right.
Turns out like those things don't even exist on Mac until recently. Ironically, a former coworker of ours at NSA named Patrick Wardle is currently building these as part of their project. It's an open source project called Objective-C, which it's meant for providing all these like diagnostics, what's automatically starting, what is injecting into what's calling out to these websites. So while Windows Right is still 25 years into it, still getting beat up or even longer, Mac obviously has a similar rich background, but we're just starting to get like the introspection tools.
Right.
And the reason for it is there's just starting to be a real need where we're clearly seeing, I mean, our team, Chris, do you recall of our team, is it 80, 90% of our team's using Mac?
Yeah, a lot. All the marketing, all the sales. We tried to get them on Chromebooks because they were like, Duo was using them and they were super secure. And we're like, we're going to get you guys Chromebooks. And they kind of rebelled a little bit. They pretty much said like, guys, this is not.
That was not a little bit. They had
This is
pitchforks.
not a place I want to work.
Yeah, we briefly tried to do something similar with iPad Pros, and then we were like, maybe we should do something with Chromebooks, and then we decided, no, we'll just let them all use MacBook Airs and be done with it.
Yeah, but that's it, right? Like, look at between just our two companies, how many folks actually in a situation where Mac is becoming the norm, and as a result, hackers are going to go where opportunity. It's that like corny 90s Field of Dreams reference. Like if you build it, they will come. Right? They've built Macs and people are using them. And now that we're there, malware authors will come, right? And they'll come with malware, unfortunately. So we're even in that situation now where it was initially, let's get out, let's be, get a platform in place, let's be viable. But one of the number one things that we're cranking away at right now is better support and expanding from a proof of concept to a full-on Mac agent, which is, that's cool. It's cool that we're, the hackers are pivoting too, and it's cool that all of us are playing with these new tools, but that also means the attack surface is like much broader too.
My last company, we were doing user entity behavioral analytics. And so we were also working on, endpoints on laptops, and, we had Windows was where we were focused, and we'd partnered with someone who, they had like an app, a Mac OS endpoint, but I would say it wasn't nearly as rich as the Windows one is, because most enterprises still weren't using Mac as much. But as that continues to penetrate the market, obviously that's going to create more demand. More people are going to have interest in attacking those, right?
Yeah,
because larger percentage.
As a CISO, how do you deal with all of these different and unique environments, right? Macs, Windows. I'm sure some of your developers probably have Linux machines and stuff.
No, so I roll with an iron fist. And so everybody's on a Mac. There's only a couple of Windows machines. I usually don't talk about it, but our finance team rebels if I try and force them onto anything other than
Oh my goodness.
Same thing. It's because So I actually had one. I said, "Show me, like what can you do in O365 or Office?" And it turns out Excel is
Right.
not as good outside
Yeah.
of
Yeah, we
the
tried to
Windows
get
environment.
we hired a VP of finance. We were going to order him a Mac, and he was like, "No,
No, right.
absolutely not."
Right. You can put a virtual machine on there running Windows for me. That right. Actually, it's funny. I just got off a call with a different company, and they were telling me that they got their finance guy not just using a Mac, but using G Suite. So, yeah, I don't know. I guess mind blowing for me because Excel, I get it
because I'm jealous of that guy.
exactly. Excel is amazing. But yeah, so we for the most part, everything's running on Windows. And then we have, we use MDM and other things to sort of manage them. And then everything we're doing is cloud-based. So there's very little, in fact, like one of our, somebody was down today, got locked out of their laptop. I won't get into the bugs in Mac OS, but got locked out. And so wiped her laptop and got her up and running very, very quickly because nothing's stored locally. So there's a fair bit of security that comes from that as well. We just don't really have almost everything that needs to be protected is protected somewhere else where it's easier to sort of manage and monitor.
Nice.
Now we get that. I mean, I'm always thinking about the audience, right? We get a chance to do a lot of like podcasts, a lot of education and training. I think about CyberAry's audience, right? Which is a lot of learners. Mm-hmm. And, for those folks that are upcoming in stuff like A+ or Security Plus or CCNA or any of those, common foundations that we think of, I'm always, reminiscent of like when I learned those and I got my certifications forever ago, the environment was completely different. So when I thought about like, how would I architect, a network, for instance, proper segmentation and things back in the day, it looked nothing like this. For instance, we have some of the even startups that are in the market where we're at that use appliances, and that's the only way they can provide security. And the day that work from home happened with COVID-19, those appliances protected nobody. Right. Everybody, there weren't VPNing back into the network to get it. And so it's cool about learning some of these foundational skills nowadays. I'd argue you have a huge leg up on a lot of the people that came from the old world where everything was, I had a firewall and it was protected just like a castle, right? It's got a moat and high walls and archers and, but nowadays everybody's everywhere. Look, we're working from 4 different locations right now for this podcast.
Right. The other thing is like, as things move towards serverless, like what does security look when there is no server, right? And and how do you secure that? And how do you monitor that? Intrusion detection, what does that look like? If the machine's only up for, for a few minutes to, or the instance is running for a few minutes to run a function and then shuts down again.
Yeah, Chris uses Lambda, right? For milliseconds it builds in hundreds at the 100 millisecond level.
Right.
What are you going to find when it's up that quick? And if there is something going on, do you have introspection into that? Probably not.
Right. So I think it's interesting that we at CyberAry very lucky in that, early on we were able to sort of go that whole DevSecOps infrastructure as code, really adopt the cloud way of doing things. So it makes all of that a lot easier. Other places, they just, especially the larger organizations or even small ones that don't have the team, don't have the ability to hire those people. I think it's getting to that level is very difficult. I think there's so much that's still old world, and I forget about that. I get spoiled sometimes when I talk to my team, and then I go and talk to someone else. I was like, oh, I forgot about that. That's a real thing, isn't it? Whatever it is. So
Ryan, you get huge kudos for doing a good job at hiring Mike here, because the people who aren't adopting this type of like infrastructure as service or the idea of infrastructure as code are in for a rude awakening. I mean, we're talking about it's becoming so mainstream for us. For our CRM, right, where we store obviously all our applicants and things, you could go through the UI and point and click and create a whole bunch of these objects. But we're talking about Chris's engineering team the other day actually provisions how the CRM works through code now. It's 100%. So it's repeatable. It's done in a standard, and even if it goes down or somebody blows it away by accident, they can reprovision not only from backups, but the actual objects now. And you would, when you think of infrastructure as code, you think of like maybe I provisioned a server or a firewall or something along those lines. You don't think about tables in your CRM, but that's where it's going. So Hats off to you, Mike, for embracing that stuff early on.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, no, we same thing. Anything, whenever somebody requests access to anything, it's all pull requests. It gets reviewed, which gives you that also not just the infrastructure as code from the perspective of, oh, if everything were to shut down, can we just stand it back up? But the audit trails that come along with that by following good software engineering practices of like, hey, we need 2 approvers to approve a pull request means that there's nobody getting access without someone without someone else's eyes on it. So there's always that audit trail. There's always, there's a lot of controls in place, and it's just a natural. I think the key to making it work is that it's just a natural flow. It's just a part of the workflow, especially for the software developers. As you start getting into their workflows and inserting security into that, I think it's important to recognize how they work and make sure that what you're doing just sort of aligns with that fairly well. So it just looks like another unit test if it's the case of like, hey, there's this dependency check that just failed. The library you're using is out of date or has a CVE. Like, how do I remediate that? But as a software developer, without having to know really all of the minutia that goes with that, it's like, oh, just update the library, test this branch, and issue a pull request. Done.
Yeah, I got you. And, definitely not getting political at all, but in the woke atmosphere that we're at, right? It's hard to get rid of, old legacy things, old legacy habits. And I can't but help think about some of our partners that, they've been doing it this way for 20 some years and it's worked. And the IT person has been around, whether guy or gal, right, has been doing it this way. And breaking those habits is hard. And so like the idea of people investing in this constant, like, whether education and training, I think we're all kind of lucky that our companies are only a couple years old, right? 5-6 years old. That we get to build on all this like rock star development where we look and we're purely in the cloud and we have all this functionality. Meanwhile, guaranteed, go knock on the accountant or law firm's door, closest to you, and you'll see like the most, ratchet beat up network you've ever seen because they've never iterated. Maybe they've got better at like their law firm or how they're keeping up with the most modern laws, but it's definitely not that way in IT.
Yeah. The other thing,
what did you walk into at Cyberry?
So when I first got here, everything was running on WordPress, which not exactly a scalable, extensible solution. And we were, again, on the last conversation I was having, we were joking that like our monitoring solution was Twitter. So that's frequently how we found out the site was down, was because users were like, I can't log in. My first week, I think in my first week or 2 weeks, I think the site went down 4 times. So I knew like this needs to be addressed. So one of the first people I hired, I stole from my last organization, brought him in as a contractor to do infrastructure. And originally the intent was like, hey, let's re-architect. And then it was like, hey, let's just stabilize so that we can work on these other things. So stabilize and scale. And we moved pretty quickly through that. 9 months worth of work to get to the point where we were finally launching our new architecture. It was a lot of work to sort of just stabilize WordPress. And securing it is a whole nother.
And what did you walk into? Go ahead, Chris.
I'll just say kudos to you for making that decision and kind of not just saying like, okay, we have this thing, let's just keep going with it, because that's the easy thing, right? It's like,
well, I was hired specifically. Kudos to Ryan and Trevor and the founders, because that's what I was hired for.
Oh, okay,
right?
Yeah.
There was this recognition of this thing isn't going to scale. We need a better solution here, and let's find someone to help us do that. And so I was very excited. It was one of the few times where I was coming in, and it was sort of this like weird place of like certain amount of brownfield, but also a ton of greenfield, because I knew we were going to be able to do all this new infrastructure stuff. So
I think that's super hard though. I mean, if you look at like Netflix, right? Netflix was shipping DVDs. They were making money. They were making a bunch of money. And they said, you know what, this DVD thing is cool, but this is not the future. Like, we're going to shed this whole like shipping DVD business and we're going to streaming. And a lot of people were like, you're crazy. Like, you're taking this business that is making money, that is growing, and you're going to throw it away for this unknown thing. Like, you're crazy. Look where they are now. Imagine if they were still shipping DVDs, they'd be done. Hulu and Amazon streaming and all those other, they'd have killed them a long time ago.
Yep.
Mike, you walked into more of a firestorm also from how we were running our own internal network, right? Windows server boxes.
Yeah, I mean, everything was, I mean, there was a lot going on. We were using Office 365. We had a contractor who she also contracted with other sister companies. And so there were some shared resources,
Data
things like that.
co-location type.
Yeah, there was a firewall, but I didn't have control over it. This other company did, stuff like that. So again, the same. It's why I hired Jonathan. The first person I brought in as a contractor was originally to help me solve all of those things because he'd helped me in the past with solving them. But there was a number of those fun times. You look at it's getting everybody to putting in more processes right now. Like I remember everybody had admin access to everything. The notion of least privilege was like, why would we not have admin access? And, there's still, my job is to say yes. My job is to figure out a way to get someone what they need. It's not to block them, but at the same time, making sure that we're not just saying yes to everything and that you don't overprivilege.
Yeah. On a daily basis, we look at over 500,000 computers. We can generally tell within the first handful of minutes based on like the sanity, I won't say sanity of your network, we'll say hygiene, right, of your network, whether or not you're implementing least privilege. It's that crystal clear to us. So, I know it's one thing to read about it in the books. It's a whole nother thing to actually do it. Maybe that's the biggest takeaway on some of this stuff is like, look, we're talking about it. It's been around for 20 years that we should do this. Do it.
Yeah, no, I mean, just getting multi-factor authentication or any of those types of things, right? We all know that's good things to do. Trying to roll that stuff out, or on the IT front, right? There was no MDM, there was no DEP. Our COO would just go to the Apple store and buy a Mac, for whatever new employee. There was no standardization of what those things even looked like. So getting a lot of that under control. And now, despite not really having an IT team, moving more and more towards, what are we going to do from an MDM to make sure that, people who don't need admin access on their laptop don't have admin access on their laptop. Which when you only have, 1.5 people, and one of those people is me doing IT, it's pretty tough to figure out how to make that work. But yeah, it's easier when you started a company when there's 19 people and you can sort of, there's a lot of buy-in from people that everybody understood the importance. It's a cybersecurity. We're in, cybersecurity space. People understand it. There was, I never got a lot of resistance, which was great. And I can't imagine what's like at other organizations where that isn't the case. I remember one of the companies I worked at where was actually the company that really sort of started shifting me from software development into security. And I remember talking to the CISO and I didn't envy the guy. Like he was just like at every turn, everybody was
broken soul.
Yeah. I mean, everybody was just trying to figure out how to work around his policies, and all his policies were like completely reasonable. Like, yeah, you know what? That's a segregated network. Don't plug in don't just change the Ethernet cable. So, but yeah, so that's a tough job. And I'm sort of blessed that, where I work and the people that again, it's fairly straightforward.
It's interesting how similar we are. I mean, from the same standpoint of like, hire somebody, go order a Mac, go to, the Apple store, just order a Mac, ship it to their house. We don't have an IT team either. It's like me and like, we got kind of like an ad hoc volunteer-based IT team.
Right.
And so it's like, we're in the same, like MDM trying to lock stuff down. But like, to your point, I want to say yes. I don't want to be the no guy. I don't want to be that CISO or the person who's making the policies that everybody hates and everybody's trying to go around.
Right.
But I got to balance that with like security.
Yeah, I need to enable productivity.
Well, one of the things I learned at my last job, which was great, I was also for a little while on VP of product and platform. So one of the things that was driving me nuts was there was some people on what we'd say is on the other side. So on the professional services side, our sort of customer success side who were constantly going around me to get information from the engineers. And one of the first lessons I learned was, well, if I have an 8:30 meeting with this guy every day to go through all of the priorities, he's not going to do that. And what I learned was, the reason why people work around you is because what you're trying to do makes their life harder. If you can figure out how to make it so that it's just natural and fits into what they want to do, nobody wants to work around you. Everybody wants to follow the rules. It's just when those rules are preventing them from being productive. And so just sort of recognizing that and just figuring out a way and saying like, okay, cool, let's, maybe I have to make a change. Maybe I have to get up early every morning to talk to you, or maybe we have to set up some new administrative like privilege that doesn't, some role that doesn't exist, just so that we can make sure that we're satisfying what you need. But yeah, it's definitely a lesson.
So Ryan, we've geeked out hardcore over here on you, man. Getting all kinds of nerdy.
Oh, Ryan's still here?
We miss anything here though?
Mike, what do you think? Did you have a good discussion there?
I think we had a good discussion. Yeah.
Good. Why don't we pivot then? Let's hear what's the future holding for Huntress? What do the next kind of 12 months look like, and then where do you think this thing is going?
Yeah, I'll give away some cool secrets here. So one of the things that we always imagined was our product was probably a platform from the early get-go, but didn't know what that meant, right? It just meant we had a bigger vision for what we wanted to do, and there was a lot of things we wanted to do. But you got to start somewhere. That's always the problem. Like even these security incidents we talked about, or taking away admin privileges, you got to start somewhere. Yeah. And so we did. We started with persistence. But during our raise, when we started talking with investors were like, this is going to be huge, especially when you're going after, most recent census shows over 30 million small businesses and medium businesses in just the US. So they're like, look, you're going after a market that's just huge. Why stop at just persistence? And we're like, oh, we got some real tricks up our sleeves. So the next 12 months, actually the next 12 days, we're going to take this vision that we've had for the last 4.5 years, and we're going to more or less not tell our customers. They're going to come in and they're going to have a platform instead of a product, which has multiple products within this platform at no cost. It's one of the benefits for us that when we looked at like what the economy needs right now, what we needed to be able to show and give back, that's huge. So literally they don't know. We're not planning to make an announcement till it's time. And we're going to spring this on them as a just huge thanks for being with us with the no adjustments to the finance side. But what that actually is doing is it's self-serving. For us, we've always had more than just like hacker persistence. We're like, look, people have a hard time tweaking those group policies to be able to set least privilege on admin, or set these really sharp ideas like, let's not allow multiple failed password attempts within a certain amount of time. Let's lock it out. Like we know these basics. So we're going to start adding many more, whether we call them products or services, that's kind of still up in the air, but many more services. And it's just part of the Huntress platform. Once again, for free. So we're feeling pretty good about that. The big problems that we're looking to slay right away is ransomware. So if you're thinking about the canary in the coal mine conversation, this is going to be like our own canary that as soon as, the canary dies, you got to get out of that coal mine. This is going to be, oh crap, we have ransomware at Sunday night. Let's start restoring from backups now instead of 7:00 in the morning when that customer's PO'd that they're down, right? Because productivity's out, kind of giving the IT team, a leg up on hackers in this cat and mouse game. But I would say the next 12 months are heavily involved around expanding that platform and the products offered on it. Chris, you'd say that's accurate?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the only thing I would add to that is I know the cyber audience is a lot of people, trying to get into security, learning and stuff. From a founder perspective, it's real easy to think big in the very beginning and say, like, we're going to make this huge platform. But you can't be sort of kind of okay at a bunch of things. You're not gonna really do well. You got to be focused. And so for us, we were super focused on persistence, like laser focused. That was all we did. And to some of the points that were made earlier, we had to say no to a lot of things. There were a lot of ideas that we had that we toyed around with. We were like, oh, we could do this cool thing. Like, no, we need a persistence. We need to get this. We need to show people value. Let's not try to go too broad too early. And so, we did that. We went for a while and we said, okay, with this raise, we're going to bring in money. We're going to expand the team. And at that same time, we're going to go big on this whole platform thing and show that it's like MDR was cool. That was how we got here. But there's so many other problems that small and medium businesses face with their security and implementing it and monitoring it. How do we help them with that?
Yeah, the next one, right, is the bigger vision, more than 12 months, right? But the visions that you can dream of. What's funny is, once again, as a founder, everybody asks you, especially investors, the same couple questions that sometimes you want to, roll your eyes at. What are you going to do in the future? And the answer, there's only three answers, right? I'm going to IPO the sucker and go public. I am going to get bought, or I'm going to die trying. That's your only three outcomes in startup life, period. And after you answer that 1,000 times, you kind of want to yell that. But what's funny is, even for us as founders, we knew we were making differences. We knew we were growing very quick. I mean, we're talking about 24 months of 10% month over month growth, that we had in a row, and still growing on this trend. Even during the COVID-19, seeing a little bit less of the growth, but we're talking about solid growth, never a low month. But I would say it's only been in the last probably 12 months for sure that we went from, I think we're going to be able to do something big, to I know we're going to be able to make something huge. And so I would say, taking a vulnerable moment, IPO is now something where when we say we're going to do it, it's not just a pitch to investors, but investors or not, we know how we're going to get there. We know what we're going to do. We know we're going to have to adapt and release products sooner or later. Like we didn't see COVID-19 coming, right? We didn't see the economy going to trash, but we did see, the ability to make a bigger difference. And so I would say, for the first time in 5 years, it's no longer a question of some people ask, how do you become a unicorn? Or how do you that effectively means, how do you become worth $1 billion, right? The 3 comma club, or Trace Commas Club, for anybody that watches Silicon Valley, right? But the long story short is, it's now pretty evident we're going to be able to get there. It's just going to be a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of what Chris mentioned, which is not being the master at everything, but getting really good at some very specific basics. And then hopefully be where Chris and I are now at in our security career, where you could throw any security problem at us, we can now solve it. It's just taken us 20 years to get there, right? 20 years of being terrible at a lot of things, but being good at one or two to come full circle. So I would say that would be my 5-year of, we're going to continue doubling revenue every year. We're going to continue doubling or tripling what our products can do for our partners, showing more value. And I would encourage maybe anybody else listening to this thing, as you're kind of soul searching, that's the small investments you make in your technical acumen now are pay the dividends, that where you can go. And, if you would have asked 2000, Kyle, right, when I was on Windows 98 or ME, right, that nobody talks about, I would have never guessed I could have been at this level. But it was a whole bunch of those small investments that have paid off. Chris, am I smoking something? Am I out of it?
No, I mean, I think, like you said, it's the thing you had to say for a long time. For us, it was the thing that we had to say. And it took a while for us to really believe in that bigger vision. I remember, I don't know if this is the greatest thing to say, but I'm going to be completely honest and say, in the beginning, there were a lot of times where I was like, man, I don't want to IPO. That just seems like too much work. It seems terrible. Let's just grow the company and sell it and move on to the next thing. And so there was a lot of time for founders where we were saying these things, telling people. I don't know that, at least for myself, I didn't fully believe it for a long time, but I do now. There's a lot of stuff now that once we kind of hit that inflection point and we went from just MDR to here's all of the things that we can do in security. Here's all the things that we can make better for people. It was oh, okay, well, I'm not locked into this one thing forever. I have this massive playground now where I can go and play and make products and generate solutions for all these problems. And it just really made it much more amenable to me to say oh, I could work on this thing for 10 more years. Okay.
Cool. That's good to hear. So, guys, where can people find you? Where can they get more information?
You kind of mentioned it in the very first intro, right? We used to be called HuntresLabs.com. We still own HuntresLabs.com, but now that we've updated and graduated, good old-fashioned Huntress.com you can find us at, right? Chris and I are both super active on, social media. You can find me at Kyle Hansloven. I think you're at CBusiness.
at ChrisBiz now on
Ooh, you look at you upgraded too. So,
Twitter. I should
you know,
probably
so
do that,
we're
right?
active there. You know, obviously find us there. Once a month, we do a thing called Tradecraft Tuesday, which is where we talk about hacker tradecraft. It's non-pitch related. It's just 100%. What are the latest, you know, shady hacker things that's going on, and how are they getting by the preventive products? That's our one chance a month to still be hardcore geeks and dive into the nitty gritty. So if you love those intricate details, I think it's tradecrafttuesday.com. You can find a link to the webinar.
Yep, I would definitely highly recommend people check that out. I remember doing that with you guys a few times back in the day. So great. This was really awesome, guys. I appreciate the time. Is there anything else that we need to get out on the table? Are we good to go?
No, I think this should
Yeah.
probably be, you know, this shouldn't be the last, right? We shouldn't have every 5 years catching up with the Cyber team.
Right.
So
Correct.
we'll have to find a follow on for sure. Maybe we'll do a Tradecraft Tuesday or something together.
Fair
Sounds
enough.
great.
Thanks, guys. This was awesome.